Our speaker today is Carolyn Hoshin Jikai Dille. She's going to speaking on continuous practice today. And I'll just give you beef is for dinner. Brief is what I'm going to be here. Carolyn's been a dedicated student of Buddhist practices for over 35 years in the Soto Zen, early Buddhist insight and Tibetan traditions. She has studied intensively with several teachers in the US and Asia and has taught in Dharma communities since 1996. She carries Dharma transmission from Angie Enji Boissevain. I may be botching that, and as a graduate of Spirit Rock's CDL program. She's a poet, writer, and editor. She's presented and facilitated Dharma and Art retreats and seminars for over 23 years for Insight Meditation Center and Insight Santa Cruz in California and the Barre Center for Buddhist Studies in Massachusetts. She currently serves as the guiding teacher for the Floating Zendo online in San Jose. And hopefully everybody's comfortable and in a good spot and ready. I'll turn it over. Welcome, Carolyn. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you. And I want to thank you all at the Santa Barbara Zen Center. I want to thank Anton and the board for inviting me, and everyone who is serving today and behind the scenes maybe before today. It really takes a Sangha to make all this work, make these talks possible, setting up and recording and managing, and really this is serving Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So that's what we're doing today. I'm very glad to be here with you, and it's a good morning, good friends, as Wei Neng gave us that wonderful greeting when we gather together to share Dharma and to share our hearts and minds, what is alive for us in the Dharma as we meet every moment of Dharma that unfolds in our lives. So I would like to speak a bit about continuous practice, and it's a large subject. It's because it's what we're doing. It goes on. And of course, Dogen had a lot to say about continuous practice, and Gyoji went on for 2 chapters, and they're large talks, long talks, with many wonderful and Dogen kind of poetry and stories he told of former Dharma lives of other teachers, and but basically always return to practice never ends, and that's the theme I would like to emphasize today. And I think now, or at least for me and for many I speak with, Dharma friends and others who practice perhaps not Buddha Dharma or Soto Zen forms, but different forms of Dharma in their lives, meeting what arises. And now in times that are unsettled on many levels, this is challenging for all of us, no matter how long we've been practicing or how little we've been practicing. But it helps me to remind myself that this is nothing new. These are times that have always been with us. This is part of the condition of being human. And one thing that Shakyamuni Buddha recognized so clearly, so long ago. I think particularly of the Chan poets, whom I love, Bo Chui and others who were also monks as well as being poets, and sometimes EQ, sometimes abbots of led Zen centers. And so those folks lived in very unsettled times. There were always things going on, wars, and particularly, but also cataclysms. You know, we here in California get to experience that pretty regularly. like earthquakes, those types of cataclysms. And also other rivers flooding, things have always happened in human lives because our planet itself is a dynamic and ever-changing system. So how do we work with those, live with those, so that we can stay balanced and meet the moments that arise? So I'd particularly like to focus on the paramitas and the precepts, which they're, I don't know, many ways I could say they're cousins or siblings, but they work together to help us keep continually practicing, to keep us returning to the center, which is the practice. And they're also, for me, a continual source of inspiration. And I think that becomes clear when I ask, what am I practicing? What are we practicing? And for me, the answer to that is we're practicing our humanness and our humaneness, being awake to our whole Buddha Dharma nature, Buddha human nature. And it helps me to remind myself that this is again a metaphor, but below the whole world of Buddhism, from Shakyamuni Buddha's truths, insights that have stayed alive for us for millennia, below that, below everything he brought, and below the whole Mahayana, below Chan, below Soto Zen, below the triple treasure itself, you could say, beyond all Buddha Dharmas and all the ancestors, it comes down to us. There is each one of us who practice, and we are all doing that as we go on in our lives, the best we can. And I like to remind myself too, it's really inspiring for me to remember that Shakyamuni was not a Buddhist, and he did not have a particular form he followed, but he awoke to the whole undividedness of himself and everyone and everything else, which we can call by many different names that get, levels of reality and emptiness, form and emptiness. And those are all true, and those all highlight aspects of what it is to be a human being, and to be awake to knowing, coming together to practice, to know that there is something deep and also broad in us that we want to know more about, how to be human, how to be balanced, how to manifest our wisdom and our compassion. What he brought was just so powerful. We are all practicing a form of it. But I like to remember too that he kept practicing. He never stopped practicing. And until he died, until his last breath, really. There are a lot of stories about that in early Buddhism. But I think he did that to keep embodying it, to keep showing up in this human form, both for himself and for others, for the people that he came in contact, who were also knew that there was something that they needed to know more deeply and further. Of course, there are many stories of how he was visited by doubt and by anger, even by walking away from the Sangha. There are stories of that because they were misbehaving, let's say. But he always returned. He always returned to practice, and he always returned to Sangha, and he always returned to the Dharma he knew. He kept on. And this is what Dogen also mentions through stories and anecdotes from early Buddhism, because he was very well versed in early Buddhism. He mentions those throughout the Shobogenzo, throughout all of his talks, but in continuous practice especially. So I return again and again to what I like to call the big P's. They're like these, they're almost like a mala, just keeping the refrain of what the paramitas are and what the precepts are. They're ready reminders in a handy form, and they're also practical guides of what we're concerned with, the mysteries and difficulties and enlightenments and insights of being a human being, of being humane. They remind us, as Buddha did in the Dhammapada, the way of the Dharma, the Dhamma. Just as you wish to be happy, so do all beings wish to be happy. They remind us of that when it looks like we are against them or they are against us. And it's very hard to maintain an equanimity toward actions that people take in our world, both on a personal level and on a collective level. We know that intuitively, that all beings love life and fear death and fear many other things. And yet we collectively and individually continually make trouble for ourselves. So that the paramitas and the precepts remind us again of how we come back and release some of that trouble we're making for ourselves. So I'll just briefly say the short list of the paramitas, particularly because they are the manifestation of the humaneness. So the prohibitory precepts are also very important. They're like two sides of, the wings of a bird. They're two, they both carry us through our lives. But the paramitas, they emphasize our humaneness and how we can meet things in the most gentle way, in the most inclusive way with others, with other human beings. And to me, that seems very, very important in this time. It's always important. But when changes happen rapidly and people are doing things that destabilize things and causing suffering for others, I need to remind myself that there is a way to meet this. And that will be individual for each of us, of course. In our lives, there are many things we need to meet, things that don't go our way. So the short list of the paramitas is generosity, first of all, just that feeling of the heart to just be open to being generous, is being quiet sometimes when someone says something that we find it's not fair or not right. And then there's compassion and action. That's usually called ethics or morality. There's patience or forbearance is another paramita. And an important one is energy, perseverance, staying with practicing, continuous practice, even when things are very difficult. And then meditation, the practice of shikantaza, the practice of just sitting. Wisdom. And then there's wisdom, prajna, that we chant in the Heart Sutra. Prajna, that wisdom beyond wisdom, the wisdom that holds all the contradictions of being human, with the fact that we're also Buddhas, or practicing to be Buddhas anyway, bodhisattvas. We all want to dwell in the divine, in the states of, where we are Buddhas, away from the realities of pain and impermanence and things that are not in our control, which is pretty much everything. I don't know about your life, but there's a lot we're not in control of. And we want to continue. We do want to continue practice. That's why we're here. We're continuing. We want to continue with that wider knowledge, that more holistic knowledge that we carry as our gift as human beings. And it's not a Vijna knowledge, it's the Prajna knowledge. So it's not a knowing things and individual things and putting them together in that way. This is the gift that Shakyamuni saw in his breakthrough vision under the Bodhi tree. It's a kind of gestalt knowing, seeing that everything is both whole and individual, form and emptiness at the same time. So that prajna wisdom recognizes that there are levels of reality, the relative, the non-relative, and it reconciles and it holds them together. It goes beyond that way. In that way, it's transcendent, as we say in the Heart Sutra. It goes beyond our egos, our small self-perceptions, and yet it includes that. So we can be kind to ourselves in our small self-perceptions. We can be kind when we realize we're unkind. We can be generous when we realize we have been selfish. All of that is prajna, and all of that, I believe, that's what Shakyamuni saw and passed on. And the precepts really remind us of that. That's the other side. No killing, no stealing, no lying, no sexual misconduct, no abusing, intoxicants, and on. There's a whole another 5 list. But all of these remind us that we all fall off, that there's actually, as my teacher would say, there's no way to keep the precepts. They're impossible, because if you think you're going to keep them and you're never going to lie or whatever you're doing, you're deluding yourself. It's being aware that yes, there are other ways. That's then turning to the paramitas for me. And all this kind of prajna knowledge, it opens to us slowly, opens for us, and sometimes suddenly. So both of those things happen throughout our continuous practice, no matter how long we've been practicing or how long we haven't been practicing. The practice of sitting and stilling. This is the gift that our teacher and founder of Soto Zen gave us, Dogen gave us. Shikantaza, sitting and stilling, just that simplicity. Slow, stop, sit, still, see. Our lives, how to act, when to act, become clear to us. We begin to meet the situations in our lives with appropriate responses, rather than from the small me, the frightened me, the me who doesn't have enough, the me who always wants more. And the other beauty of Shikantaza, the emphasis of it, because of course it is what Shakyamuni Buddha did. And according to all the stories, all the other Buddhas too, although when they were bodhisattvas, they had many ways to manifest themselves. In the Jataka tales, for example, they were parrots who flew over with with beaks full of water to put out forest fires. Many beautiful stories of bodhisattvas being generous, meeting situations with the appropriate response from where they were. Think a little parrot seeing that the forest is on fire and knowing all that parrot could do was just bring a beak full of water. But that parrot did that. So Zazen is one of the places and a key place for us to return to, where we can dwell in our home base. Because home base is the real place where we act in accordance with the paramitas and precepts, where we incorporate them, we embody them, we take them into our whole being, heart, mind, spirit, body, all of it, sitting and stilling, shikantaza. I mentioned the paramitas as a sphere, as a list, but actually I find them more as a sphere, as a geodesic dome in a way, or Indra's net. Their connections radiate one to another and also interradiate with the precepts. And then the actions that come from acting according to the paramitas and precepts radiate outward to everyone we come in contact with. They can also be turned and looked at in a different kind of knowledge through different points of view, contemplated, reflected upon. And that sometimes allows us to see the non-dual nature of life, because we're not denying our intelligence, our intellect, our mind. There's no mind, and then there's also mind, both. So it's sometimes very helpful to make use of all of our apparatus as human beings, all the six senses. When we listen to talks, when we read Buddhist writings and what they've said throughout the millennia. And then sometimes that leads us, or simply shikantaza leads us to reflection, asking ourselves, well, what does this situation mean? What does this mean for me practically? How can I apply this? What does it mean in this situation? Reflecting by ourselves and with others, with our Dharma friends. So I think we have such a great foundation in this vast Dharma that we are given, to us. And however way it came to us, it was a gift somehow. That from Shakyamuni Buddha, Shantideva, Bodhidharma, Sengshan, all the Chan and Zen ancestors, Dogen, and all the literally countless, unknown and known, but maybe we don't know them. Women and men teachers have left behind for us. Those are the precious gift, as Shantideva says. Yet in a certain way, they're for our individual journeys, they are like looking at a photo of our friend rather than our friend standing right next to us. And that friend is really ourself, our true self, if you want to use that term, because this is our continuous practice. We take great inspiration and we have great gratitude for these teachings. And we've signed up for this path to embody them as best we can, as long as our breath goes on. They help keep us alive and vital and filled with compassion and energy, even in the face of really difficult things. Our lives are brief and colorful, and ours only. And that is why continuous practice is so helpful, because our lives also shine and reflect on other lives, and they receive others' reflections. So I think the paramitas and the precepts remind us, perhaps the simple and basic practice is to just try to return to being unself-centered, to being centered, but not self-centered. So sitting down, the simplicity of that, it asks some patience. It asks some of the paramitas. It asks for our energy, our perseverance. It asks for setting aside time to bring our tendencies to fragment, to scatter, setting aside time to let that go and gather ourselves, alone or together with friends, and practice together. And especially in sesshin settings, they're designed to maximize this time and energy. And they're another wonderful gift, or other wonderful gifts to us and to others. Sometimes I think I'd just like to rebrand, wave my magic language wand and rebrand sesshin or meditation retreat and just call it a refresher course. It's a refresher course in being human and being humane. And we all need refreshing. It's a refresher course in just being at ease and being happy, even when we're twitching. And so I'm not using happiness in the sense of, oh, it was a great sitting. My body didn't bother me. My mind didn't bother me. I'm using happiness in the sense of just staying with whenever all of that is going on. We don't know what that's preparing us for often. That's why we continue on. Things do become clear. That's my experience. And there's always more to become clear. Refreshing, just sitting. It's like drinking water and eating, resting, sleeping. So I think I've said enough. And of course, this is always an exchange. It's a Dharma discussion, not so much a Dharma talk for me. I get to say what I know and what I can share, but really, I always want to hear from you and try to leave enough time for that. I would like to close with two poems which resonate for me on continuous practice, and particularly the precepts and the paramitas within that continuous practice. So one is one that I wrote for fellow pilgrims who took the precepts on a Buddhist pilgrimage in India. And the other one is, the second one is by Jane Hirschfield, a wonderful, wonderful Zen poet and person. So, pilgrimage precepts. You open the door of your ear to find yourself in a forest that grows from the ground of your heart-mind. Which words enter like bells to sound you along the path? Which thunder your understanding awake? With friends, you gather the falling leaves you will till into far fields. And Jane Hirschfield, late prayer. Tenderness does not choose its own uses. It goes out to everything equally, circling rabbit and hawk. Look in the iron bucket, a single nail, a single ruby, all the heavens and hells. They rattle in the heart and make one sound. Thank you very much for your attention. And please share what you'd like to. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Well, I'm opening it up to the floor, so I'll let anybody who wants to go.
Thank you for your book and for the word refresh. It's very refreshing, you know, and to combine it with sitting still, you know, and refresh. It has a lovely invitation, like, you know, to sort of clean house or reset, or, you know, it's a nice word. Thank you.
Thank you. And what is your name?
Josephine.
Thank you. It's an invitation. Sitting down.
Carolyn, this is Shoto Dave. I may be on a screen here.
Yeah.
Very nice to see you. Thank you for your discussion with us this morning. I really appreciated the theme of continuing practice by maybe revisiting the paramitas and the precepts that sometimes we get very focused on when we're going through an intensive period of study, maybe preparing for a Jikai or being part of a book group where they come up. But sometimes I can go months without referring to them or thinking of them, and really appreciate your reminder that these are kind of the wings of a bird that carry our practice. Are there occasions or ways in your practice that you kind of set yourself to remind yourself of some of these very core teachings about our practice that are so helpful, but sometimes we get away from them, and maybe don't pay attention to them on a regular basis. So I find myself guilty of that. I'd love your thoughts on how you sort of continually refresh and remind and go back to those.
Thank you. So sometimes these come to me in actually words, no, but more often I would say that the main way to keep returning is to keep sitting, to instill that so much that when you find yourself, and this is part of our human nature that we have to accept and that we really need to, and yet just keep returning, keep going back to sitting, so that even the word, even if you know, someone says something to you sharply and you have a sharp rejoinder, that you understand that you have to be patient with yourself and you understand what you did. So there's often called the conscience, that there's that part of us is part of us too. And there's a lot in early Buddhism about that. And I don't want to get into the definitions and all of that, the language, but I think in my practice, it's feeling it in the body. You feel a little pang in your heart, or you feel a kind of an energy that, oh, I did that, and you can apologize right away, for example. That's, you know, it's, if that's an appropriate where you are, or can sometimes reflection. I also use that. Sometimes in a sitting, I will have a period of just reflecting on that I have not been so aware of, that I have not been aware of generosity, and I have not been aware of, and then I reflect on, you know, what in my personal situation, what that might be, so I may be able to come up to identify through reflection what that is, and then I know that more deeply, and I will return to it more easily. So I was really trying to hit some of those, to highlight some of those in the talk about reflection. Sometimes it's reading, you know, all of those, anything that we can bring. Sometimes people who don't read, or it's watching videos of talks. There are a lot of videos of talks, you know, there are, we have incredible resources to return. But the main thing for returning to return is sitting, because that gets us to, we feel that refreshment. So when you feel that, also there's noticing, there's like the simple, which is more emphasized in mindfulness practice, noticing when you are being generous or being ungenerous, or noticing, and just knowing that in a non-judgmental way, or noticing if you're judgmental. It can get sometimes a little convoluted, but simple awareness itself is a huge help. Mindfulness, that kind of awareness, without judgment, and without clinging, without holding on. Aware, and then you're on to the next moment. So I hope that addressed some of the things that you were interested in.
Yes, thank you, very helpful.
Thank you.
So continuous, Alan, continuous Dharma practice. So we have that for ourselves as individuals, as Zen practitioners. So, and I suppose we want to do what we can to help others on that path also, whether they are Zen practitioners or not. And for someone like you, I would imagine that you're at your level, that your intuition and instincts guide you. But do you have, is it intuitive and instinctual for you now, or do you have a strategy of sorts, for particularly for non-Zen practice, the way that you can engage in a positive way, both for yourself and for their progress also?
Thank you, Alan. I don't think I would use the term strategy. But I appreciate your bringing in intuition. That has always been, before I began Buddhist practice, a major force in my life, you know. But I realize that we all have different gifts and we all have different compositions. And so that may not be what works for somebody else. So I guess but I could say that one could certainly say that the paramitas and the precepts are a strategy, to remind yourself, especially with others. So the more open and generous you are, people respond to that. People respond particularly to the paramitas. So they don't respond so much to the thou shalt nots, to the no killing, no, you know. And of course, you don't say these things. It's like you become embodied. You try to be aware that you are embodying it. You know, you try to be aware of those moments when you are just meeting someone who, as the one example I gave, like, who is having a bad day or spoke harshly, or you don't even know the reasons, maybe, and maybe you don't even know the person, or you do know the person intimately. That's where it gets tricky. As one Buddhist friend said, my family loves me my family doesn't like me when I'm Buddhist, but they love me when I'm being a Buddha. Yeah. So, you know, so I guess that would be the strategy, to just try to be aware of how, when you are embodying, maybe that's the strategy, when you are actually embodying the paramitas, each one of them, perseverance. You know, I mean, we get tired of things, and as we get older, I will attest, it's easier to get tired. So so, you know, it's like, oh, I'm tired of this going on. So whatever it is that we're meeting, and people see that too. If you keep going on in a task, a difficult task, and people respond to that. You bring up what energy you have. That's one example, or just being kind, and that's what I could say to your query. Thank you very much for that, Alan. Kenko.
My name is Kenko. Greetings from Massachusetts. I really appreciate the reminder about the continuous practice. And there's sort of two aspects to then. One is, you know, so much of our daily lives are about, I want to get there, and what is sort of the plan? What do I need to do? Am I getting closer? Am I not getting closer? And in that context, also noticing the falling short, ooh, I really didn't want to give that, right? And as you described, you know, in a way, the realization that that too is part of being human, and in a way, seeing that and holding that is maybe all that needs to happen, right? It's not like, you know, oh, I'm a bad Buddhist. I'm sort of, you know, now I have to go back to step one, but just sort of see, oh, this is what it feels like to be withholding, right? And to notice in the body that, you know, there is a tightening going on there, and that there is, you know, a fear, and then to say, well, you know, what is that fear about? Does it mean that, you know, if I give this away, I won't have enough? Is that really true, right? Or is, like you just described, that, you know, having generosity flowing from us also means that the generosity actually flows much more broadly in us, in the environment as well. So I don't have to control it, and I can't control it, right? I can just, how does Dogen say, I can just accept it with gratitude.
Mm.
Mhm. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Kenko. We don't have to hold it. Just accept it with gratitude. Thank you. In early Buddhist sutta, the name is not coming to me, but is nothing whatsoever is worth clinging to, including those wonderful moments that we have in life and on the cushion. These, like, it's a continual flow. That's just always going on, always. And for many people, for me certainly, I mean, I think really that's why it's continuous practice, because to really feel that more and more, because we're also that other side that I didn't particularly talk about, but it's certainly, we are complicated humans, and we have the fears, we are hardwired in a sense to have fear reactions that allowed us to survive. But that isn't the totality. That is not the totality. So remembering that. Thank you. Thank you, King.
Carolyn, this is Michael over here. I don't know if I turned it enough, but thank you. This concept of practice is conjuring up a lot of just thought around practice for me that is very sports driven. You know, athletics.
Yeah.
And just concepts of practice, about how practice makes perfect, and you know, practicing in order to be good at something, then when the game is on, that's when you really show up, you know, with all you've learned. And then things, tangential concepts of like discipline and skill, and really a lot of dual concepts, right, of winning and losing, and habits also, like practice as a habit, that when I'm out of practice, almost like that body in motion concept, or, you know, sort of thing, the body in motion stays in motion. But that's some of my just commentary, but I'm curious your thoughts on, and I've already heard a little bit today, but I'm curious your thoughts on whether that's a healthy comparison, or whether we're perhaps those definitions I'm kind of associating with practice are really not useful in this context, and that perhaps there's a redefining of practice that needs to take place in order to allow some room for grace and not be so hard on myself.
Michael, thank you so much. These are really practical questions and a lot of, for me, in a lot of senses that I would say one definition is that actually was like, I remember decades ago when a teacher said this in a talk, practice does not make perfect. Practice is perfect. So he was talking in terms of Dharma practice. So practice is perfect. So that's just showing up and doing it, however it is. So practice is perfect. And then, yeah, the goal-oriented, which is not just sports, but it's really our whole culture is very much oriented in that, in bifurcating and dividing things into segments of, well, doing this and getting that. But as we see, just reading the news, that's not always true. It's not always true that that people are rewarded for their practice and their good behavior, and not rewarded for their bad behavior. In fact, the opposite is often true in this world. So those conundrums, how do we work with those? So just maybe not searching so much for a way to frame it, but to frame what this is doing, but just really sensing, because athletics and sports is very body oriented. And there are people who have made careers, and pretty successful careers, out of counseling sports teams with mindfulness, for example, of just being aware. I actually went to a seminar with one of those teachers. It was very interesting. So he was definitely a Buddhist practitioner, and he just took it into the realm of basketball. And so not being so goal-oriented, you're just doing this and tuning into what the whole body mind is. A lot of sports, I don't watch a lot of sports, but I used to play tennis some, and I watch tennis sometimes. And a lot of the people who play now talk about using meditation to help them stay centered and stay balanced. So you could say that's, sort of a different thing than Dogen had in mind, definitely. But my belief is that it actually affects them. I think once you start doing these practices, you are affected at levels that you don't realize until much longer, if you keep doing them, that is. They are changing you and changing you in that direction of being less reactive, less fearful. I mean, the pressures on championship tennis or Jiminy, that's kind of unreal, or championship anything, really. But so I don't know if I've addressed all of what you said. You really brought up a lot, but I hope I've addressed some of it. Thank you so much for bringing this up, because these are questions to, how do we live in this world where we're meeting a lot of messages in our work, which Kenko kind of referred to, like in our daily lives, we're encouraged to do things and, in certain ways, and get things and be things. And, it's where our practice is. It's where where that's in our lives. So it's not even on the cushion, but it does take some willingness to set aside the time, not be distracted, and just sit and still, as we've done today. Yeah. and regularly, that's also true. So those things about sports, I think are absolutely, yes, you just keep showing up. It's, in a way, I prefer that phrase because it's less goal oriented, although it does certainly have that quality. So again, thank you, Michael.
Thank you. I think if I just a quick follow-up where you've left me, it's very helpful is, without overthinking this, but just, I think I'm realizing where the difference or the conflict lies is practice in that sense of just practice to attain. It's about attaining something that you're, like you were saying, a goal, and that there's some finality in that, like practicing to become good, to win at something, and then it's been accomplished. Whereas the difference here with the continuous practice is that continuous part is so fundamental, that there isn't, and they're going in line with some of the Buddhist philosophy about how there's nothing to attain, there is no attainment. I think is helpful for me. So I really appreciate your commentary on this.
Thank you, Michael. That's beautiful. It's really, yes. Yes.
I'd like to share, this is Bob, and on our website, we have a saying by our late head priest, Koan Sensei, which kind of sums up what I heard today. Just keep going. So that's my share. Just keep going.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. Yes.
Well, we are at time, but if anybody has any burning desire, as they say, to speak,
Please.
it doesn't look like it. So, Carolyn, we'll just collectively, or on behalf of the Sangha, I'll say thank you to you for your time today and talking with us, or having this discussion. We really appreciate you being here with us. And we've seen you before, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Mm-hmm. Again, thank you all, and I want to thank one of my Sangha members, Wendy, who's on the screen, who came by today, and appreciate you being here, Wendy, who's a long time practitioner. Thank you. Have a really easeful and happy Sunday, the rest of the day, wherever you are.